My name is Jonathan Hayes, and I am a former sergeant in the U.S. Army. If you are reading this, it means I am already in the walls of a psychiatric hospital in one of those gray buildings that often flicker across news reports. They call it rehabilitation, and I call it a slow fading away. Each day it becomes harder to distinguish reality from my nightmares, but I will try to tell my story while I am still able to separate facts from imagined shadows. It all started when I returned from my last tour. Years of war in the desert, rains of lead, and sand that literally ate away at my body became just part of the problem. The hardest part was the feeling that with each new mission I was losing a piece of myself. I didn't notice the first symptoms like any other soldier. I was used to ignoring pain, both physical and emotional. I lived in Chicago with my wife and son. When I came back, they greeted me with smiles and hugs, but something inside me had already cracked. War doesn't just leave scars, it transforms a person, gradually turning them into something else, something alien to themselves. I tried to be normal. I tried not to show my pain, not to reveal how much I was struggling. But with each passing day, my reflection in the mirror looked more and more distorted. It all began with nightmares. They were so real that I could smell the scents and hear the sounds of war even in my sleep. I heard explosions, screams, and the rustle of bullets as if they were penetrating the walls of my room. Every morning I woke up in a cold sweat, feeling that I hadn't escaped my demons. My family, God knows how they tried to help me. But what can you do when a person doesn't want to admit they are sick? When you, not even realizing it, continue to scream at your wife or son, mistaking them for enemies in your visions. They were there. Yes, they didn't turn away from me. But with each of my outbursts, I saw their eyes grow more and more worried. I started to see things. No, not things, people. Those I had killed in the war. They came to me everywhere on the streets, in stores, even in my own home. One night I woke up feeling that someone was standing by my bed. I turned on the light and saw a young man I had killed in Iraq. He stood there, with a hole in his head, blood streaming from it, and looked at me with his empty eyes. I screamed. My wife rushed to me, hugged me, but it didn't help. The shadow of that young man continued to stand in the corner of the room until I burst into a fit of hysteria. I know that this was just a product of my mind, but that doesn't make it any less real. I started to avoid mirrors because they reflected not only me, but also those who had been killed by my hands. Wherever I went, they followed me like shadows of the past that I could not shake off. My outbursts became more frequent. Once I shattered all the windows in the apartment, thinking that was my only way to rid myself of those who were trying to invade me. My wife and son had to go to her mother's for a few weeks, leaving me alone, hoping that I would calm down. But instead, everything only got worse. The scariest day was when I realized I could no longer distinguish reality from illusions. I stepped outside and saw familiar faces from the war, appearing all around me. I didn't understand who among them was a living person and who was a ghost. I started yelling at passers-by, suspecting them of being part of my nightmares. The screams turned into an assault when I hit a man who was just walking by, mistaking him for my enemy. The police arrested me, and I was sent for evaluation in a psychiatric hospital. The doctors here say I have post-traumatic stress disorder. Maybe they're right, but sometimes I feel that this is not just PTSD. I'm not just reliving the war. It continues to live within me, tearing my soul apart from the inside. Every day I hear voices. They call me, whisper something in my ear, forcing me to remember every moment on the battlefield again and again. They want me to suffer. And you know what's the scariest part? I no longer resist. I am no longer sure that I want to. My family still comes to see me. They believe that I can recover. I see their faces filled with hope every time they visit me in my room. But deep down, I understand that there is no way back for me. I am broken. This war, it hasn't ended for me, it continues to rage on. And I am no longer a soldier. I am just a refugee in my own mind, losing myself more with each passing day. In this hospital bed, time flows differently. Sometimes it feels like days merge into one endless night. I feel like the nights here are especially long. I lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the clock, which sometimes seems so loud that it strikes my head. It reminds me of the sound of gunfire, that moment when everything ends. But why does that sound continue endlessly for me? Nurses come in with medications, give me pills, promising that they will calm my mind, drown out the voices. I take them, but inside I feel that this is just a temporary measure. As if with each day I am slipping further away, and these pills are merely a way to slow down the process. The doctors talk about hope, about the future. But what is the future when you're no longer sure of your past? Sometimes it seems to me that I am not just observing my nightmares, I am living in them. They become part of my reality, intertwining with the present. The doctors try to assure me that this is just memories, that I am here, in the hospital safe. But I no longer believe in safety. All these white walls with their sterility remind me of the barracks where I learned to kill. The white color here is just like that light in the operating rooms where they treated our wounded. White always means pain. My family comes to see me. They smile when they see me, trying to encourage me. My son draws pictures for me, depicting us together fishing or playing soccer. I look at them, but it feels like it's another person. That Jonathan Hayes, who could enjoy simple things, remained back there, on the battlefield, under enemy fire. Sometimes it feels like I never returned at all. When they leave, the pain becomes stronger. I don't want them to see me breaking down. Sometimes I imagine how they would live without me, as if I were already gone. It's a horrible thought, but it comes to me when the darkness in my mind becomes unbearable. I continue to write because it's the only way to hold on to reality. Every time my fingers touch the paper, I feel that this is my last connection to this world. But even these words I write sometimes feel foreign to me, as if it's not me writing, but someone else watching my life from the outside. If you are reading this, remember one thing: war doesn't end when you take off the uniform. It remains within you, eroding your soul. I am still alive, but sometimes it feels like that's not what you could call living. And here I am, in this hospital. I am still alive, but maybe that's not what you could call living. My name is Emily, and I am the wife of Dr. Michael Stewart, an anesthesiologist. We lived in a small town in America, where life was slow-paced and people cherished simple things. But everything changed. Michael was a good doctor devoted to his work, but his job turned into a heavy burden that he couldn't handle. In recent months, I feel like he's slipping away from us, as if he's being consumed by darkness. Michael was always caring and attentive. He loved his profession, but over time he spent more and more time with his patients, forgetting about himself and about us. I often tried to talk to him, but he would just wave it off, insisting that everything was fine. While he was preparing others for surgeries, his own life was slowly falling apart. Since he lost his parents when he was only 8, he was never quite the same. I remember how he shared his fears about how the loss of loved ones seemed to have cursed him. He couldn't allow himself to feel pain, so he focused solely on his patients. His work became both his salvation and his curse. But what began in his student years suddenly escalated into something more serious. His colleagues, psychiatrists, started to worry about him, but he always laughed it off, assuring them he could handle it. He was sure that helping others would make him stronger. But in reality, he was dying inside. I watched him gradually lose touch with reality. Sometimes he would snap back and seem like the old Michael again, but those moments became rarer and rarer. He was especially troubled by one patient, a young man named Kevin, who came into the hospital with severe injuries. Michael threw himself completely into Kevin's treatment, forgetting about everything else. I heard him repeat Kevin's name, as if it had become a mantra. He would come home with tear-filled eyes, lost in memories of patients he couldn't save. I remember one night when he, sobbing, said, "They're eating me alive." I would give anything to start over, to never become an anesthesiologist. In that moment, I realized he was truly lost. Everything worsened. And one day, when he became uncontrollable again, he nearly took his own life. It happened on one of those dark nights when he was driving home from work. He was on a familiar street when images of all those he couldn't save flashed through his mind, and he couldn't handle the torment. In that moment, he lost control, and the car crashed into a tree. When they found him, he couldn't utter a word. He just cried quietly, as if it could ease his inner suffering. After that incident, his condition only worsened. We sent him to see psychiatrists who were once his colleagues. They prescribed him treatment, but each session only deepened his sense of guilt. As a doctor who once saved lives, he now became a patient in their hands. With each session, he grew more withdrawn. I could feel him distancing himself from me, as if I, too, had become a part of his pain. It took many months before he started to come back to himself. Sometimes he would rise above his shadow, but as soon as he was reminded of his patients, he would plunge back into the abyss. In those moments, it was like he forgot everything except for his failures. He would cry, and every time it happened, I felt like his soul was slipping away. I tried to support him, to remind him how important he was to our family. We spent evenings together, trying to remember what it was like to be happy. But in his eyes, I couldn't see the reflection of the joy I once knew. I knew he was still in there somewhere, but the circumstances around him were too overpowering. I decided to write his story. Maybe it will help him. Maybe it will help others. I hope that one day he'll be able to see the world through his own eyes again. For now, he remains in the shadows, and I am here beside him, a witness to his inner struggle.